Kimberly from Fat Quarter Shop, and you've made it to part 2 of our free Christmas time sew along. Last week we made block 1, so you want to check that video out and go to Fat Quarter Shop for all the fabric requirements. You can download part 1 free, and now you can download part 2 free, and we'll be using the same fabrics from Christmas Stitch that we did in video 1. So let's start block 2. We also have a matching cross stitch because the more the merrier. On week 2, I'm going to teach you a really cool trick. So when you're working with flying geese, you can do the traditional way, which is how we wrote the instructions. But I'm going to show you a way to make them using flying geese paper. Now, to know which one you need to use, in your pattern it says 1.5 by 2.5. That's your unfinished size. And then you come and look at your flying geese, and the 1 by 2 inch is the finished, and the 1.5 by 2.5 is the unfinished. And I'm going to be making the top hard candy, and then we'll be assembling the others. I've already put these 3 together, but I'm going to show you how to use this foundation paper, and I think you're going to love it. What you'll do is just pull one of the pages out, and when I'm working with this, one thing I like to do is trim off some of this excess paper that's not needed. So I'm just going to kind of cut around this dotted line. And I think it's great anytime you're quilting, try new techniques, and then if you like them, incorporate them in the future, and if you don't like them, you don't have to do them again. Now from here, I'm going to look, this is going to make 2 flying geese, and I need 2 right here, and this is B and D. But instead of cutting the B and D from here, I'm going to look here, and for placement 1, I need a 3.25 by 4 inch rectangle, and I need 2 2.5 inch squares. So I've already cut that. From here, you're gonna use the same technique on any of the paper. This is just for this one specifically, and it's on the lid of each paper. Now what I like to do is put the numbers right side down. I'm going to take some a glue pen. This is a Sue Daily glue pen, and just put that right on there, and you'll see it's the same size that I trimmed it down to. Now from here, I am going to, on these lines right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm going to put a crease. I'm going to do that on all 4 first. And each person, when you're working with this foundation paper, everyone does it slightly different. This is just kind of what works for me. If you've learned a different way, that's totally fine. Now from here, I'm going to push this back on the crease, use an add a quarter ruler. It's got the 1/4 inch where it hits the paper, and trim on all 4 sides. Now if you didn't want to do that, you can use a normal ruler and just put the 1/4 inch line on it. Okay, so this is the front, and this is where your fabric is going to go. We've placed part 1, now we need to do part 2 next. Now what I'm going to do there is I'm going to just put the fabric, I'm going to just put a little bit of glue, put this on the 2, do the same thing on the other side. I prefer to not use pins when I'm working with paper because I feel like it kind of shifts a little bit. And then that's going to keep that in place. We're going to turn that over, and we're going to go to the sewing machine, and I'm going to use a really short stitch length, like a 1.2. I'm going to start about a 1/4 inch away from the line, and I'm going to stitch all the way from here all the way down, and I'm going to go a 1/4 inch past that line. Now that's because I like my stitches to be nice and secure, and when I pull the paper, I don't want my stitches to come off. And then on the other side, I will do the same thing where I start a 1/4 inch away, stitch, and then go past a 1/4 inch. And we're going to do that with an open toe foot, and we'll be right back. Now from here, I'm going to press to one side. Now the pattern calls for pressing open, and you can't really press open with the paper, but we did get it to work because we pressed the next unit open. So go ahead and just press to one side. This is a quick press seam roller by Lori Holt, and I'm going to do that just because I don't want to have to get the iron out. And then from here, I'm going to just trim these little edges off, pull the paper back on that number 3 line, and just trim this off so you don't have this bulk in the back. And then we're gonna do the number 3s at the same time. So just put a little bit of glue. And then turn that over and do the same thing, except you're gonna have a longer seam this time, but again, start a 1/4 inch out and go a 1/4 inch past on both sides. Now you can see my stitches and you can see how they extend past the drawn line. What you're gonna do now is we're gonna press this open, and I'm just gonna use the seam press roller, and I can iron these later. I prefer to just use the quick press seam roller and iron after the paper is off. Now that it's ironed, go to the back side and we're gonna cut on the solid lines. And what I like to do here is cut the 4 sides first. And the more accurate you stitch on the line and the more accurate you cut on the line, the more accurate your flying geese will be. Now from here, we're gonna cut these 2 remaining lines. So I'll cut this one, turn this one around, cut this one, and then I'm gonna remove the paper. And since I use that short stitch length, it will just come off. And that gives you 2 beautifully pieced flying geese. So we did step 1 using the It's So Emma foundation paper. The next step is to make the inside of the candy, and we're gonna do that using the traditional method. So I'm gonna take my fabric C rectangle, one of them, take 4 fabric B squares, draw a line on the wrong side with a friction pin. This ink will disappear later. And what I'm gonna do here is use seam align glue, and I'm gonna put them on 2 opposing corners. And since I've been using this glue, I feel like I am sewing a lot faster than when I used to use pins. Now I'm gonna move my stitch length up to a 1.5, stitch directly on the lines, and come right back. From here, I'm going to trim a 1/4 inch away from my sewn line. And these need to be pressed open. So I'm going to use the quick press seam roller, and you can press open with it. Once you have that, add your remaining corner squares. And stitch on the lines. From here, trim again and press open one more time. And if you're having trouble getting it pressed open with the seam presser, then you can use an iron. So now we're going to assemble our candy, and like I said, I'm going to be making 1 of these units, but you'll follow the pattern to be able to make 4. And right here, what you're going to be doing is touching these different intersections. So you're going to have a lot of seams, and I'm going to show you how to do that. What you will do is put right sides together, and you can see right here it's not perfectly straight. So when you look, there's a tiny bit extra. I'm going to cut that off, because it'll make it easier. So you can see those points are going to need to match. So what I will do is pin the left and the right side first. I'm going to put my pin in the point of the flying geese, right in the point, and then put it in the next point. That is why I use such a small stitch length, because if I didn't do that when I'm doing this step, my stitches might start coming out. Get your pin to be straight up, pull it out, and pin. And this is how I do anything that has points that are matching. And when I go to the machine, I'm going to switch to a 1/4 inch foot so I can stitch with a 1/4 inch seam. Now before I iron, I'm going to look just to make sure my points match, and they do. If they didn't, I would unstitch them and then restitch them. And I'm gonna press to one side first, let the heat cool down, and then press open. And here, I would definitely let your clapper sit on that until it's perfectly dry. Now, like I said, we're gonna make one of these on camera, so I've done that, and I need to add a fabric A rectangle to the right side. And this is directional fabric, but I actually didn't pay attention to that on this, so it's up to you if you want to do that. Pin, sew with a 1/4 inch seam, and then we will press. From here, you'll just press toward the fabric A rectangle, and we can assemble our block. So we made this unit. You're going to repeat these steps to make 3 more. And then you're going to lay them out with 2 on the left and 2 on the right. And I'm going to pin these 2 together and these 2 together. And I'm just going to pin all the way down. So from here, I'm going to just place it where it goes on the board. And instead of ironing right now, I'm going to put these right sides together and pin, and then we'll iron the block at the very, very end. Now, if you prefer, you can iron right now if you would like to. Look at this and just make sure none of my points are chopped off. They look really nice, and I'm going to iron one seam at a time. So hold your block up and find the bottom seam. Set your seam, press to one side. I'm going to do that on all 3, and then I will come back and press open. Now you can see there's so many seams, it's kind of bumpy. So what we're going to do is press open. So I've press to one side, and then I'm going to come back, finger press it open, and it's going to make it look a lot flatter on the front. Now, if you don't want to press open, you don't have to. This is just so that we can make the block look a little bit flatter in our quilt. Now it's much flatter. What I will do is use 2 clappers, or actually 3. So that every seam gets nice and flat, and then after that is nice and cooled off, we're going to trim the outside of the block. So from here, what I like to do is just get the little edges nice and clean. Very little should come off, but any loose threads will come off at this point, and it'll just make your blocks nicer to put together at the end. And this candy block, it can either go this way or this way, but what you could do is do a row quilt where you have like rows of candy with sashing in between, and that would look awesome. Thanks for joining me today for our Christmastime Mystery Quilt Along. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and click the bell so you can be notified for next week's vlog. And I'll see you next week.